At this point in time, I'd like to call the Monday, January 11th, 2021 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. If we'd please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I get started with our agenda, I'd just like to go over how this meeting will proceed. I suspect people who've been at several of the planning and zoning meetings that are virtual are fairly aware, but again, and I'd like to explain how this planning and zoning meeting will be conducted tonight in light of the constraints we have while working with the GoToMeeting system. As many of you are in your homes, if your microphone is not muted, please mute it. If that is not possible, please be conscious of the noise around you. Microphones on different devices have different levels of sensitivity. The GoToMeeting system does not deal well with multiple simultaneous speakers. The audio from only one person will come through at a time. Therefore, please only speak if I acknowledge you or recognize you. If there is an exchange going on between the presenter and a questioner, each of you must finish speaking before the responding person can start. As a meeting organizer, I have a button, a mute all button. If individuals are not participating respectfully, I'll be forced to mute all persons' buttons until the floor is cleared. If someone whoever doesn't have their microphone muted, please mute it.
Yeah, it's you.
Excuse me? If I mute all while you're speaking, please be patient. I will allow you all to resume speaking as soon as reasonably possible. The following is the general overview as how this meeting will be conducted. The applicant and/or its representative makes a presentation of the application, after which Mr. Talbot and members of the commission will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. The public will then have the opportunity to comment on all applications. Once the public has had the opportunity to comment, the applicant will have the opportunity to make any final comments. Commission members will have the opportunity to ask any final questions and/or discuss the application. Once completed, the commission may take action on the application. For members of the public who want to be heard during the meeting, there is a chat bar you can open by clicking on the icon that looks like the speech bubble near the top right portion of the screen. When I ask for public comment, please type into the chat bar that you would like to speak. Each will be called upon in the order their respective questions are received. I would request the public only use the chat bar to indicate they would like to comment on an application or have a question. Please refrain from using the chat bar to communicate between one another, as it only makes my job more difficult to see who would like to comment and/or ask questions. Members of the public who have logged in just to watch, if you do not intend to participate in the meeting, please turn off your camera. If you have dialed into the toll-free number and are listening through a traditional telephone, I have no way to identify who you are. I will not see your name or telephone number. I will simply see you as caller 1, 2, 3, 4, depending upon how many callers we have. I'll attempt to ask the various callers to comment as the best I can. I will attempt to call you for comment in order of which you called in. Those who log into the meeting through a smartphone or a computer, please select the screen name. Anyone speaking for the applicant and/or as a member of the public must identify themselves by providing their name and address for the record. For those of you viewing the meeting, the agenda materials are posted on the town website. There's a tab on the right side, second below the heading, this week's meetings. And that'll go how we're going to go about conducting the meeting. So at this particular point in time, I'd like to identify those members of the commission that are here this evening. We have J.P. Benoit, who is the chairperson of the commission. We have James Fitzsimmons, who is a commission member. Jeff Cohan, also a commission member. Rocco Matarazzo, who is the secretary of the commission. Jamie Hine, who is an alternate for the commission, as well as Steve Allenson, an alternate. We have Tom Talbot, who is our acting town planner. Cheryl Ann Tubby, our recording secretary. And I'm Jim Seichter, the chairperson of the commission. Our next order of business is consider and approve the minutes of our December 14th, 2020 meeting. Are there
Mr.
any?
Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Jump the gun, JP.
I was jumping the gun. My bad.
There you go. I like people when they're eager, though. If any commission members would like to make a motion on the approval of the minutes, or if any commission members have any corrections, additions to the meeting, to the minutes, I'd ask for that. And if there are none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the Planning and Zoning Commission minutes of Monday, December 14th, 2020.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fitzsimmons seconds. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
And any abstentions? Okay, it brings us to our first order of business, which is a public hearing for special permit for fill and excavation, Pfizer, 21 Tully's Road. Again, Mr. Matarazzo, if you please read the legal notice and note all correspondence to the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have interoffice, interdepartmental referral application 409-20, dated August 6, 2020, signed by the fire marshal. We have a memorandum to Tom Talbot, acting town planner, from Aaron O'Hare, environmental planner, dated September 3rd, 2020. Correspondence from Lucas Talbot to Casey, well, at the time, Casey Hand, town planner, dated 9/4/2020. Special permit application correspondence 409-20 from Lucas Hellerick, again to Casey Hand, town planner, 10/28/2020. Correspondence from this would just be town gov at wallingford.gov to Amy Torrey, dated 4/2020.
Mr. Matarazzo, would you please stop just for a moment? Would everybody please mute their phones? We're starting to get a lot of feedback here. Thank you. If you continue, please, Mr. Matarazzo.
Yeah, that was dated 9/14/2020. Correspondence dated October 29th, 2020 from Lucas Hellerick. This is, I'm sorry, to Lucas Hellerick from Thomas Talbot, town planner. Memorandum to Tom Talbot, acting town planner, from Aaron O'Hare, environmental planner, dated November 2nd, 2020. Interoffice memorandum to Aaron O'Hare, environmental planner, from Eric Kruger, senior engineer, dated August 27th, 2020. Memorandum to Tom Talbot, acting town planner, from Aaron O'Hare, environmental planner, dated January 8th, 2021. Some correspondence to Tom Talbot, acting town planner, from Department of Engineering, dated January 8th, 2021. I believe that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. And if the applicant would please introduce himself and begin the legal notice. Also, Mr. Matarazzo, you have to excuse me. Have you read the legal notice?
I'm sorry, I did not. Legal notice, 409-20 special permit fill and excavation for Pfizer for the remedial removal and replacement of approximately 3,300 cubic yards of wetland soils on 2.23 acres on property located at 5 and 21 Pleasant Road.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. And again, with that, would the applicant please introduce himself and begin the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. This is Lucas Hellerich, representing the applicant. I'm here with Kyle Lepigian. I'll let him introduce himself in a couple seconds here. I work for Woodard & Curran. I'm a Connecticut licensed professional engineer, also a Connecticut licensed environmental professional. I represent, again, the applicant, and I am based in our Middletown, Connecticut office with an address at 213 Court Street, Middletown, Connecticut. Kyle, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Kyle Lepigian, technical manager and ecologist with Woodard & Curran, and I'm out of our Canton, Massachusetts office, and I'm serving the wetland scientist role for this project.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, may I share a plan with the commission?
Absolutely. What I will do is I will make you a presenter, and that should you should be able to do that. Okay, you should be designated as a presenter now.
Okay. So these, this is just our project drawing set, which was submitted. Let me start here. Okay. Again, thank you, Commission. This is a wetland soil remediation project. It was approved by Wallingford Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission on January 6th. What we'll talk about during this presentation, I'll start by giving an overview of the project. I'll include some background information as well as the proposed schedule. We'll also discuss some of the details related to the restoration plan, and we'll conclude with several additional points related to the application. As has been discussed, a number of project documents have been submitted. We submitted the original permit application. We submitted a complete set of revised project drawings, which incorporated all of the edits that were requested through the Inland Wetlands Watercourse Commission review process. There were several comments that were issued by the Planning and Zoning town planner, and we responded to those comments. It was a letter that was dated October 29, 2020 from the planner. We also submitted a contingency plan for potential flooding and erosion and sedimentation. So in terms of the project itself, the project is being required by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in order to remediate wetland soils that have been impacted by nickel, which is a heavy metal. Nickel at certain concentrations can be toxic to ecological receptors, hence the remediation need. What the project represents are a number of temporary disturbances which are not permanent. And the goal of the project is to improve the quality of the wetland by removing that nickel impacted soil. Consequently, we'll be removing invasive species which are present in the wetland, invasive plant species. And then finally, we'll be replacing that impacted soil that's been removed with clean soil. When we started the project, we took a number of steps to minimize the impact to the wetlands. We sampled soils, which allowed us to reduce the volume of soil that needed to be removed. We did include retaining many large trees within the wetland, within those excavation areas to allow for a better restoration of the wetlands to proceed. Ultimately, we balanced the impact to the project along with Connecticut Deep's cleanup goal within the wetland. In terms of project reviews that have been conducted, a number of stakeholders are involved. The Connecticut Deep Remediation Division has reviewed and concurred with the project via the remedial action plan that was provided to the Remediation Division. We public noticed that as well. As I mentioned before, Wallingford Inland Wetlands reviewed and approved the project. As part of the Inland Wetlands review process, a third-party peer review was performed by an engineering firm. That involved review by a professional wetland scientist as well as a water resources engineer. Army Corps New England Division is currently completing the review of the project, and US EPA has also reviewed the project with respect to inland wetlands issues. As was mentioned, the address of the project is 21 Tully's Road. It does encompass both 5 and 21 Tully's Road. The original application mentioned 21 and 25. Just want to clarify that it should be 5 and 21 Tully's Road. So the figure that we're showing here is our existing conditions plan. And as I mentioned, there's 2 parcels. This is at the intersection of Tully's Road to the north of the site, where it intersects with the Amtrak rail line. There's several buildings on this existing facility, the Amatec facility at 21 Tully's Road. And then the property that is indicated as 5 Tully's Road is actually a vacant forested property on the right of this figure. You can see Wharton Brook is on the southern end of the property. So this is on the southern end of Wallingford. There's a wetland, forested wetland area. We can also see that this project lies within the 100-year, 500-year floodplain, as well as the floodway, which is shown by this purple pink line. And we performed a number of environmental investigations, both us and prior consulting firms on this site. Was identified that ecological risk assessment was needed, that was performed. And from that ecological risk assessment, the Connecticut Deep determined that the wetland required remediation. Again, as I mentioned before, the project consists of excavation of soil, placement of clean backfill, and restoration of the wetland. Pfizer is responsible for performing the project and for monitoring and maintaining the wetland following the remediation itself. In terms of a little background, last year, December of 2019, we did perform some supplemental soil sampling, which helped us to refine the excavation volume. We also started the project with a plan to essentially clear cut the 2.2 acre area, excavate 2 feet, and backfill and restore area. But based on that soil sampling, we were able to reduce the excavation volume by half to the current volume. We were also able to optimize that excavation by limiting the 2-foot excavation to the center of the area, which I'll show you in a minute. And on the sides of that center, we have 6-inch deep excavations. About that time in December of 2019, we also had a pre-application meeting with both Inland Wetlands and Planning and Zoning. There were some concerns raised about the removal of all the trees, the fact that the project is within the floodway, and the potential for erosion into Wharton Brook. In response to the meeting, comments that were raised, and the soil sampling that we conducted around that time, we also conducted a tree survey. We approached Connecticut Deep, the Remediation Division, and we worked on a plan to retain those large trees and only remove soil to the top of the tree roots, so 6 inches. rather than clear cutting all those trees, which is typical for a remediation project. Connecticut Deep agreed with that approach. Also, we prepared a contingency plan to address flooding concerns. Go on to another figure here. Okay, this next figure is the erosion and sedimentation controls figure. I'll just briefly walk through the approach sequence here. The project would start by mobilizing to the site, mobilizing equipment, erosion, sedimentation controls, other materials required for a construction project like this. We would identify all trees that would be retained. We would install erosion and sedimentation controls, which really consist of a number of different devices: silt fence, straw wattles, a double row near Wharton Brook, straw wattles within the excavation itself, a water diversion structure. If you look on the figure, this clouded area here along Wharton Brook, that represents the lowest point of the project. And in that area, we would proactively install a temporary water diversion structure, which would mitigate high water from that brook from coming into the excavation. We would also install a turbidity curtain in the brook, and we have extra stocks of erosion and sedimentation controls available on site. And in our contingency plan, we also lay out additional measures to respond to various precipitation events. We would access the project through several stone anti-tracking pads, which are these gray rectangles, and those are temporary. We would also install a temporary stormwater diversion. You can see that there's a catch basin which collects runoff from the asphalt portion of the site. There's a stormwater outfall here, and that discharges into a stone riprap swale with a small plunge pool. During the project, we would attach an overland pipe to that outfall and route that temporarily outside of the excavation area so that we don't have stormwater entering the excavation area during the work. That temporary outfall would be very similar in nature. It would have an outfall pipe. It would have a riprap swale, again temporary, a small plunge pool, and it would be surrounded by multiple levels of erosion and sedimentation control measures. After the project is complete and the site stabilized, that temporary stormwater outfall would be removed from the project, and we would go back and restore the permanent outfall. We would perform selective clearing to be able to move equipment around the wetland. We would retain and protect all trees that have a 15-inch diameter, and those trees are shown on C003. Wait for that to refresh. So there's a number of trees here that have circles around them, and these circles represent the drip line of those trees, and within the drip line, we would only excavate to the top of the root zones, and we would protect those trees. What this figure also shows is that we would conduct this excavation work in stages, in cells. So we would excavate one of these shaped areas. We would remove that soil, bring it up to staging areas to allow it to be prepared for shipment off-site, and then we would backfill that area. I'm going to go back to C001. Okay. So if you look at the center of the figure here, you can see there's a bold black line, kind of a odd shape that surrounds this area. That represents the total excavation area. Within that area, there are two thicker gray lines that go from the north to the south. Within those two gray lines, that's the 2-foot excavation area. And then on either side of those gray lines, there's a 6-inch excavation area. So one on the east and one on the west. And I mentioned, and then once those excavations are performed, we would backfill in the 6-inch areas. We would backfill with a organic topsoil to mimic conditions in the wetland. And then in the 2-foot excavation area, the top 12 inches would be backfilled with an organic topsoil, and the bottom 12 inches within the excavation would be backfilled with a sandy loam soil, which is similar to what exists at the site. Backfilling would be prioritized around those trees, and it would also be prioritized in the lower elevation areas as well to allow for the most time for site stabilization to occur. Following backfilling, we would apply a wetland seed mix. We would also install erosion control blankets across that excavation area. As part of the inland wetlands permit process, we incorporated the feedback from the commission, again, from the peer review firm, which included the professional wetland scientist, the water resource engineer. As part of that process, we did develop a robust wetlands plantings plan, which is included in the project drawings. We included wetland restoration plan and details, an invasive plant species management plan to control invasive species during the restoration phase. And then one thing to note about the restoration monitoring program, that's going to be continued until the performance metrics are met for the project. In terms of project schedule, originally we had intended on performing the project during the fall winter of 2020, but now this project is proposed to be performed in the late spring and summer of 2021. Total anticipated schedule is on the order of several months, but the actual excavation and backfilling work should be completed over several weeks. And in terms of some additional points, we did a cut fill analysis, which is included in the project drawings. There is no net fill in the project limits, nor in the floodway. We also developed that contingency plan for potential flooding and erosion and sedimentation. That includes pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction elements. Again, based on the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission review and the third-party peer review that was performed by Malone and McBroom. We did address all their comments. We did make updates to the original project plans, and that's what's reflected in what we've submitted to the commission, Planning and Zoning Commission. And the peer review also indicated that there would be no hydraulic impact from the Quinnipiac River on the project. And then finally, for inland wetlands, in issuing their permit, they had 9 conditions of approval. And one of the conditions of approval included 4 different performance bonds. And those include sedimentation, erosion control, wetland plantings, invasive species management, post-restoration monitoring and reporting. In terms of some, I guess, closing points here for our presentation, the project did undergo significant review by the Commission, Inland Wetlands Commission, and by a peer reviewer. We have incorporated a robust erosion and sedimentation control plan and a restoration plan. We have prepared a comprehensive contingency plan for potential flooding and an invasive species management plan, both of which will be used during this project.
All your comments have been incorporated into the plans.
Oh, pardon me?
I'm sorry, please continue.
Oh, okay. And then we do believe that the project is ready to implement, and we also believe that the project will improve the overall environmental quality of this wetland by removing the nickel impacted soil, which is a regulatory requirement by Connecticut DEEP. And at this time, I'd be happy to address any questions from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of quick questions just for myself before I go to other commission members. You know, I see on your plan you have, I believe it's two, maybe three, there are proposed soil staging areas, and then there's a proposed material management area. Could you please just describe or say what those are?
Yes. The three soil staging areas are shown as these black rectangles. They're at the up gradient edge of the excavation area. And there is a detail in here that shows those. Essentially, they're going to be plastic sheeting that's placed on the ground with a geotextile underneath that. Soil that's excavated from these different excavation cells would be temporarily placed in those areas. They're also going to be surrounded by silt fence, straw bales, and those areas will allow that soil to dry out a bit before it's put into trucks for offloading. When we are not offloading or moving soil from those staging areas into the trucks, that soil would be covered by plastic sheeting and secured so that it's not eroding back into the excavation area. So those are really temporary staging areas for the soil. This proposed management area is this kind of fenced off rectangular area here. And this is up in a current landscaped area. That would really be an area where we would use that to temporarily place some equipment, additional erosion and sedimentation controls, perhaps some extra fencing. And it would also include, if we need to bring fractionation tanks for water control. We don't envision that to be a major issue, but we wanted to be prepared for that anyway. If we were to bring frac tanks on the site, they would be in this area as well within secondary containment.
Okay, and how long do you anticipate the soil that's going into the proposed soil staging area, the soil that you've taken out and are essentially remediating? How long would you anticipate that soil to be on the site? If you took something out, soil out today, how long would that be there until that's carted out?
Well, before we start the project, we have to make sure that we have approvals at an appropriate disposal facility for that material. So that would be secured ahead of time. It would likely be in that area. My guess is 1 to 2 weeks, kind of sitting in that staging area. But the volume of soil that's here and really the way these remediation projects move forward is that soil may only be in those areas for a couple of days at most in some cases. So I think it's going to be somewhat variable based on truck availability of a receiving facility to take that material, but it could be anywhere from a couple of days to maybe a couple of weeks, somewhere in that order.
Okay, then one last question. The clean soil that's coming in to essentially to fill back, how is that going to be located on the site for any period of time, or is that going to be simply coming in on a truckload by truckload pace, and then immediately put into the or put back into the project? How will that be handled?
What we intend on doing is having the trucks bring that soil in and then backing into these access pads and live dumping that clean soil back into these excavation areas rather than trying to stockpile it in another location on site.
I'm sorry.
There may be some smaller temporary piles of soil within the excavation area as it gets spread in the locations that it needs to be spread.
But essentially what you're saying is there's no long-term, even medium-term stockpiling of the soil, other than perhaps in the area that where it needs to be spread. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point in time, I believe Mr. Talbot had indicated to me that his questions, have been addressed. So I'll go to commission members, and as usual, I always start out with Mr. Fitzsimmons. So, Mr. Fitzsimmons, questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. Thanks for your presentation. I'm looking for a number because I can't imagine you spent this much time and can't give a number. How many total truck trips will this project take? Inbound, outbound?
I calculated that at one point. If you can just give me a second to look that up for you. I believe inbound and outbound, it's going to be roughly somewhere around 225 outbound, and inbound it might be a few more than that due to compressibility of soils.
Okay. And then I noted on your presentation, you talked about the project schedule, and it said late spring, summer, could take several months, should be several weeks. And I guess, could you further quantify beginning to end, how many weeks is this expected if the weather conditions are ideal?
So incorporating all the steps of mobilizing the site, establishing erosion sedimentation controls, clearing trees, establishing the temporary stormwater, performing the excavation work, performing the backfilling work, restoration work. I think all that's going to be somewhere on the order of 12 to 16 weeks, all told.
Okay. Yeah. And if I could add to the chairman had some questions regarding the temporary staging area, and I guess I too I'm concerned about it. I heard your answers to his questions, but you have three particular areas. What would the height be of those areas, the maximum height of those particular areas?
Let me see if I can find the detail for you. We don't list the maximum height here, but it's going to be something on the order of 8 to 10 feet at most.
Okay. And so the 8 to 10 feet would be, if I understood your explanation, always covered in plastic at the end of the day and secured. And the most they would be there would be several weeks.
Correct. And oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So yeah, and at the most would be several weeks, but I anticipate it could be as short as a couple days. Once a certain volume of soil has been excavated, placed in that temporary location, it may only be there, a couple days before it's shipped off site. But it may need to stay there a bit longer as well.
And then I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the trucks. The truck route is going to be Tully's to 5 to 91, or is there a different area? Because I heard you say, and I don't know if you weren't clear. Do you know where the contaminated soil is going and where the new fill is coming from, as it pertains to truck traffic?
Right. There are several potential disposal locations. Our priority disposal location is a location in central Massachusetts. So I believe the trucks could enter Tully's Road and go onto the on-ramp right on 91 north from there. So that would be the expected trucking route for disposal of soil. In terms of backfill, there's a number of locations across the state. There are some that are more proximal to Wallingford. there are some locations along the central valley of Connecticut, so they would access Route 91. And I believe they can enter the site by exiting 91, taking a quick left onto Route 5, and then a quick right onto Tully's Road.
Yeah. I mean, I would just state, I mean, to me, that would be the preferred, but Tully's already is a busy, heavily trafficked road, and that highway exit is, equally the same. That's why I was asking about the truck trips in and out, assuming the trucks would be using that. It is very close to the highway, so the idea would be to keep your trucks very nicely off our town roads and on the highway, because they'd be, getting in and out of town by using the highway. Is what I understand.
If I could, one way to think about the truck traffic in terms of maybe number of trucks per day, typically these projects, the trucking companies can really do anywhere from maybe 8 trucks per day up to, at most I've seen is, 20 trucks per day. And that's kind of usually spread out with maybe a small wave in the morning, and then another maybe midday wave, and possibly a third wave of 4 to maybe 6 trucks each wave, if you kind of think of it that way. So it's not like an endless, very long line of continuous trucks, I guess.
Right.
But I appreciate the question, though.
And then I guess, and I don't know if you can answer this, but is the new fill that's going to be brought in similar characteristics to what's there?
Yes, we did testing of the soils that are there for macronutrients and for total organic carbon. And we have some guidelines for macronutrients and for the total organic carbon for that organic soil. We also had a soil scientist visit the site. And in terms of the organic soil, it would have an organic content similar to what's there. It would also have a nutrient content similar to what's there, or better. And it would be a kind of a organic topsoil mix. And then the soil that would be backfilled from that 12 inch to 2 foot zone, that's going to be a fine sandy loam, which is what has been identified on site as well.
Okay. And I know you're a special permit with us, so, and I know you went through, because we have copies of most of the information from the Wetlands Commission, but I don't see in my notes or any of the information we have, did Pfizer consider other strategies to remove the nickel from the environment, as opposed to excavating and exposing such a large area?
Nickel is kind of a tough one. Nickel is it's the type of metal that can bind fairly strongly to organic soils, like the ones that are here in the wetland. It can zorb or adsorb to even non-organic soils. So it's difficult to remove or wash out of the soil, if you will. There are some approaches out there that have been used on some metals impacted sites. Soil washing, which would include involve a lot of disturbance, a lot of mechanical equipment, and it's not guaranteed to work. The phytoremediation is another technology that has been used on low levels of different types of metals, but that requires planting, harvesting, disposal of that harvested plant, replanting, and again, it's going to take a long time to affect this. So really, for a project like this, in a case where you have a wetland soil, you have to restore it as a wetland. It can't be capped. It can't be contained on site. It really needs to be excavated and disposed.
Yeah. All right. And if I could, just one last question, Mr. Chairman, through you. If you could just clarify, did DEP order this, or is this recommended, or is this no order from the DEP to do this? No, it's not. No, it's not a question for the chairman. I'm sorry. It was through you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask the applicant's representative.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Just my last question.
Okay.
So this project, this site is subject to the Connecticut Transfer Act, Property Transfer Act. So there's a number of areas of concern on the site that have already been remediated, dealt with. This represents one of the last areas on site to have that remediation done. So that's the driving requirement is the Property Transfer Act, and the remediation standard regulations are being followed, or those remediation standard regulations need to be complied with to complete the remediation of this wetland.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Mr. Benoit, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. And Mr. Cohen, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I got a couple of questions. Kind of following with Commissioner Fitzsimmons. Do you know what the concentration is of the contaminated soil as far as the nickel? And, you know, how that concentration is compared to, you know, an unacceptable level?
The nickel, the concentration is, I don't remember the maximum value the specific maximum value, but I think it's on the order of several hundred milligram per kilogram of nickel. It's below a human direct exposure standard, but there was some site-specific ecological toxicity testing that was done using site soils, and there was a number that was developed from that ecological toxicity testing that was below those several hundred milligram per kilogram of nickel on site. So there is nickel on site that's above that site-specific toxicity limit, and that's how we define the limit of excavation, is to remove that concentration of nickel.
So what I understand from that is, you know, the entire site is not over that limit. It's just a specific, couple of specific areas that you've tested and found it to be above the acceptable range.
Yes, it's soil that is in the top 6 inches of this bold. We'll wait for this to come up here. Yes, this bold black shape represents the excavation limits. So we have soil within the top 6 inches of the western and the eastern, approximately third of this area, and soil in the top 2 feet in the central portion that contains nickel above that standard.
Okay. I was a little unclear as to when your projected start date will be.
Well, right now we're anticipating that the projected start date would be late spring, so something like late May, early June timeframe.
Okay. One of the things that I'm going to ask about, and you know, I'm sure the Wetlands Commission did a great job. I read through a lot of their concerns and, you know, the protocols and procedures. I think they did a really great job in, you know, getting, you know, all the environmental wetlands concerns contained. But I didn't see anything on, and you didn't mention today on your Eastern box turtle protocols. Have you reviewed the site yet to see if there's any of those turtles out there?
Well, there was a tabletop review that was done that identified that the Eastern box turtle is a species of special concern in this area. And I went to our notes page here. We did include Eastern box turtle protocols.
Yeah,
And
I'm looking at it.
yep. And what we're going to do is to have a qualified herpetologist who has expertise in the Eastern box turtle, and have that herpetologist perform a pre-construction survey at the site. And then that herpetologist, and this is as part of the inland wetland kind of comment response portion, we incorporate these protocols as well, but that herpetologist will visit the site during construction. That herpetologist to conduct inspections for the turtle. The herpetologist will also provide training, and also we would develop a plan prior to the start of the project, and we would train the construction staff, the project staff, in terms of identification and proper handling of the Eastern box turtle as well, so that if the herpetologist is not there on a particular day, that staff know what to do when if they encounter Eastern box turtle.
Okay, fantastic. And my last question, kind of again dovetailing on a comment Mr. Fitzsimmons made. I noticed that in our notes that DEEP has reviewed the plan, but really didn't offer any comments back. And our own engineering department also reviewed the plan, and they didn't have any, comments one way or another. And I'm sure they gave you feedback, and no comments, I guess, are good comments. But I just want to ask you, is with conversations between those two parties, were there any other concerns that may not have been shown here? I would not think so, but I just not seeing any feedback at all.
Yeah, so and that's one reason why the peer review firm was engaged by the Inland Wetlands Commission.
Right.
So Malone and McBroom reviewed the project extensively. They conducted a site walk with us, with two of their staff. That was a good 2+ hour site walk for a 2.5 acre area. So they went over it fairly extensively, and they did a pretty thorough evaluation. So that helped to support the town of Wallingford in their assessment, helped support kind of the engineering review of the project itself. But Connecticut Deep did not raise any questions. They had extensive discussions between Connecticut Deep and the Environmental Planner's Office. And there weren't any questions that came from Connecticut Deep regarding this project. I think they were really relying on the town of Wallingford and the peer review process to be completed.
Okay, good enough. Based on the documentation here in your presentations, I'm pretty pleased with the plan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Matarazzo, any questions for the applicant?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple follow-up questions. You did mention Connecticut Deep and the Army Corps of Engineers and the US EPA had all reviewed your plan. And we just talked about Connecticut Deep, but with respect to the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA, did you actually get approvals from them, or was it just that they reviewed your plan and didn't have any comments?
Army Corps, we're still waiting on the permit approval from Army Corps. It's a general permit that we're seeking from Army Corps. And we did have discussions. They had some questions on really to review the plans that we've submitted. They've asked for, you know, as we revise these plans, we send them the updated plans to make sure that they have kind of the revised versions. They US EPA in terms of the inland wetlands restoration plan. So US EPA had provided their comments to Army Corps, and they agreed with our restoration plan in terms of the plantings and the monitoring protocols and the invasive species work as well. But we are still awaiting an approval from Army Corps.
And do you need that approval before you can begin?
Yes.
Okay. You also mentioned your monitoring protocol after the project is complete. And I think if I understood you correctly, you said that the monitoring would continue until full performance metrics were met. I was a little unclear as to what that means. I mean, you know, what metrics are you looking for, or are you looking to attain?
So it might be a good idea to have Kyle Papigian, one of my colleagues, maybe respond to that, because that was he was one of the primary authors of that plan.
Sure. This is Kyle Papigian. I'll jump in here. Like Luke had said before, the goal is really to meet these performance standards that we've established, and they're established in the wetland restoration plan. They are around making sure that the site is stable, that the soils are stable at a baseline level of that needs to be met. There are also several criteria related to vegetation cover. So there needs to be an adequate level of vegetation across the site. And then there needs to be an adequate amount of woody vegetation, so trees and shrubs, and coverage of those types of species at the site. There also needs to be there also needs to be a demonstration that the trees and shrubs are growing on a year-to-year basis, because it is a floodplain forest. So we want to make sure that that type of habitat heterogeneity is maintained in the future. And finally, there are metrics related to invasive species and maintaining coverage of invasive species as low as possible on the site and below a total cover of 10%. So in order to ensure that those criteria are being met, the site will be monitored twice a year for up to 10 years using some monitoring plots that will be established so that they can be visited on a year-to-year basis. And there'd be no discussion of ending the monitoring until at least two of those, two of our monitoring reports indicate that those monitoring criteria are met.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And those reports that will be produced based upon the monitoring, do those get submitted to the town of Wallingford?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Okay. The other question I had is that earlier there was a diagram that was put up that showed each of the cells that would be excavated and then filled. I was just wondering, I think if I understood correctly, each cell would be excavated separately. Will there be some sort of barrier put around each cell as it's being excavated in any way to prevent contamination?
Well, so this is the diagram that you mentioned. Each excavation cell is approximately, the 6-inch shells were designed to be about 100 cubic yards each in volume, and the 2-foot excavation cells were designed to be about 200 cubic yards each. In terms of barriers, in the 6-inch areas, we would envision that we would have to mark out those cells in the field, and the excavation would go down 6 inches. We did not envision placing a barrier between the cells just because of the shallow depth of that excavation. In terms of the 2-foot area, again, it's a 2-foot deep excavation, and we didn't envision placing a type of barrier between an excavated and unexcavated area. We don't envision that there would be significant movement of soil between the cells, given the nature of the type of kind of organic soil that's out there right now.
Yeah, fair enough. And just so that I understand the process for each cell, each cell will be excavated. Will you work on one cell at a time? So in terms of, would you excavate one cell and then fill it and then move on to the next cell, excavate it and then fill it? Or do you excavate all the cells at once and then fill them all at once?
We will not excavate all the cells at once and fill them all. To the extent that we can, in terms of being able to dispose soil off-site, and also import that clean backfill material, we envision excavating maybe 1 to several cells. Again, these are relatively manageable volumes, and then backfilling those as quick as possible. That was one of the provisions in the contingency plan that we developed. Is we want to make sure these cells are not open too long and that they're backfilled and stabilized with seed mix, erosion control blankets. I can envision several of these cells being conducted over the course of several days together and then backfilled together. We will not open up all the cells at once and for excavation and backfill.
Okay. I don't think I have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Heine. And Mr. Allison, any questions for the applicant?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And again, just to clarify, Mr. Talbot, you're satisfied with the applicant's responses? So at this point in time, I entertain any members of the public that would like to comment on this application. Again, please make use of the chat bar. I'll just wait a few moments for people who may want to comment through the chat bar, and then I'll ask anyone who's called in if they would like to comment. And right now, I do not see that there's anyone that would like to comment through the chat bar. That being said, I will go to the callers. Caller number 1. Again, I have no idea who the callers are, so hopefully when people entered, they know which caller number they may be. Caller 2. Caller 3. Caller 5. Caller 6. Caller 8. Caller 11.
Oh, come on.
Caller 13. Caller 14. And caller 15. At this point, I have not heard that any callers would like to comment on the application, just in case someone might have forgotten which caller they are. Again, any callers that would like to comment, please just speak your name. Okay, I hear none, and I'm just going back to the chat bar, and I don't see that there's anyone that would like to comment through the chat bar. That being said, before I entertain a motion to close the public hearing, I'd ask any commission members if they have any final comments. Yes, Mr. Fitzsimmons, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. They're going to be posting $178,000 in bonds for wetlands. Is there a bond requirement for planning and zoning, or is that sufficient?
I believe there's a bond requirement of $20,000, sedimentation and erosion bond. That would obviously be, in addition to the various bonds from the wetland.
Okay, and then my other question through you, Mr. Chairman, is just because it's a special permit and the number of truck trips and the discussion regarding the length of time, is there interest in restricting the hours that they can do it, Monday through Saturday, no Sundays? Or are we just gonna let it go? Because I didn't hear anything in specific requirements.
Mr. Fitzsimmons, I guess I believe what they've asked for, and the applicant can confirm this, I believe they asked Monday through Saturday, 7 to 7. Would the applicant like to confirm that, or are the hours that you're looking for different than that, sir?
I think that's what we replied. We replied to in the response to the October 29th comments.
Yeah, Mr. Fitzsimmons, excuse me, Mr. Talbot has confirmed that in his note.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing further.
Thank you. And again, would the applicant like to make any final comments before I entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
No further comments except to thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. So at this particular point in time, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the public hearing for application 409-20 special permit fill and excavation for Pfizer for the remedial removal and replacement of approximately 3,300 cubic yards of wetland soils on 2.23 acres on property located at 5 and 21 Tully's Road.
We have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
And Mr. Matarazzo.
Yes.
And I vote yes. At this point in time, I would entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 409-20 special permit fill and excavation for Pfizer for the remedial removal and replacement of approximately 3,300 cubic yards of wetland soils on 2.23 acres of property located at 5 and 21 Tully's Road, as shown on plans entitled 29 Tully's Road, Wallingford, Connecticut, project number 0232569.00, dated August 2020, amended to December 2020, subject to 1, comments and interoffice memorandum from the fire marshal to the Planning and Zoning Commission dated August 12th, 2020. 2, comments in interoffice memorandum from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, Water Sewer Divisions, to Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, CC to Thomas Talbot, Town Planner, dated August 27th, 2020. 3, comments in interoffice memorandum from the Department of Engineering to Thomas Talbot, Planner, dated January 8th, 2021. Comments, number 4, comments in interoffice memorandum from Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, to Thomas Talbot, Planner, listing all conditions of Inland Wetlands Commission approval, number A20-7.1, dated January 8th, 2021. All conditions of that approval incorporated into application for special permit number 409-20, with the exception of condition number 12. And number 5, sedimentation and erosion control bond of $20,000.
And Mr. Benoit, if I could add just one more, the obtaining of an Army Corps of Engineer general permit.
Yes.
Thank you. We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
I'd second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. Voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Mr. Cohan.
Yes.
Mr. Matarazzo.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Your application has been approved, gentlemen. Thank you for your very exhaustive presentation, and have a good evening.
Thank you for your time, and have a good evening as well.
Thank you. Okay, it brings us to our next item. It's a continuation of a public hearing. It's a zoning text amendment, sections 4.9 IX, section 4.10 I5, and section 4.13, the Watershed Protection District 2.1 and 5.1C. And I'd ask Mr. Matarazzo if you would please read all additional correspondence for this application.
Mr. Chairman, we have correspondence, Office of the Mayor, dated January 5th, 2021, to your attention, Chairman Fighter, and signed by the Mayor, William Dickinson, Janice Small, Law Department, Timothy Ryan, Economic Development, and Rick Hendershot, Director of Utilities.
Good, and if you would, because it's a relatively short memo, would you please read it too for the record?
Sure. Referencing zoning text amendment, sections 4.9 IX, section 4.10 I5, and 4.13 WPD, 2.1, 5.1.C, point 6.1.C, and 6.12.B. Dear Commissioners, due to the serious legal and policy concerns about the proposal changes, we are requesting that additional time to develop thoughts and language for consideration of the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the 902-20 application. We request that the current amendments be withdrawn. The undersigned will be meeting to articulate relevant language and will provide such work product by March 31st, 2021 at the latest. Thank you for your consideration. This request with the intention to encourage a more comprehensive proposal for the Commission's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. I think as all commission members know, and I suspect most of the members of the public, we had last month, we had a very lengthy discussion on these various zoning text amendments, which raised various issues. Apparently, I'm being told that there was a meeting amongst the various people that have signed this request, as well as I believe Mr. Talbot, or else I know Mr. Talbot also participated in that meeting. Based upon that meeting, it was requested by these individuals that we give them more time to look at the regulations, see what issues there may be, from a legal standpoint, also from a definition standpoint of some uses, perhaps enhancing some of the definitions to make it more clear. So with that, this letter was, was generated asking that we withdraw the application. So with that, I would ask, commission members, as far as what their opinion is, if they are interested in withdrawing the application. And it is, I will say, it is the commission's application, so it's, within our authority to do that. And I will start out with, as always, with Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't object to us pulling this off the agenda, at least for a couple months. I mean, I think we've been talking about this for several years, so I think several months is going to give everyone time to, regroup, so to speak, in light of the information that the water and sewer raised. So it's not going away. It's just going to be pushed to the side for a little while. So I do appreciate that we were given a proposed timeline by the end of the first quarter. So I don't object, but I understand we don't want to table it because we'd have to do a due notice for a new public hearing. So I'm not opposed to the request from the mayor's office.
Dave, I'm going to say something.
Excuse me? Mr. Benoit, any comments?
I have no comments. I am in agreement with Commissioner Fitzsimmons.
Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, when this came across, I was a little taken aback by the memo, quite honestly, with, as Mr. Fitzsimmons said, this has been in the works for years, and we've had numerous meetings, and, for a concerned party to come back at this late stage in the game is a little disconcerting to me, especially with the wording, serious legal and policy concerns. I mean, I don't want to scold anybody, but I will. Why are they being surfaced now? I really don't have any objection to, waiting, as folks said. It's been, undergoing changes for a while. A few more months are not going to make any difference. And even if we proceeded, they could request changes again. So we might as well get these incorporated. I had one other thing I was going to say, but I lost my thought here. So yeah, I'm okay with. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is this kind of sets a precedent that we normally, well, since I've been on the commission, we haven't seen, and that's, I guess you could look at this as, even though it's the town of Wallingford, you can look at it as a private party. And, we set the precedent where some other private citizen could come in and, state their objections in this manner as well. And, with this precedent being set, I think we'd have to seriously consider that request. But again, I'm okay with, letting this go for a few more months. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monterat?
I'm in agreement with Mr. Fitzsimmons' comments.
And Mr. Hine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am generally in agreement with what everybody has said. I would be in favor of continuing the public hearing as opposed to withdrawing it altogether. One of the things I do have some concern about is that I think we need to stress to the parties requesting this continuance that we need to move forward as soon as possible. You know, one of the issues that has come up is sort of what I see as two conflicting provisions in these two sections. One that allows warehousing and storage in areas in the wetlands protection district, that being in the IX zone, and in the I5 zone, such storage and warehousing would not be permitted in properties that fall within that district. It's an issue that I brought up originally back in February of last year. And at that time, the town planner was going to follow up with the water division and get us a response as to what the thinking was between those two conflicting provisions and whether the water division took any position as to whether that prohibition should be extended between the two districts or in fact withdrawn. And I understand it's been a challenging year, but we've never gotten any response to that. And I think it's important that we do get a response to that, because we're going to have applicants that are coming before us in the meantime, especially if we put this off for a couple months. And I, quite frankly, don't feel comfortable acting on those applications without a response from the water division, particularly if they involve these provisions. So I guess my question is there any way that we can request a response on those issues from the water division in the meantime? If we're going to put this off for a couple months, you know, something that's kind of been pending for almost a year, 11 months at this point without a response. And I'm wondering if we can, maybe Mr. Talbot can send a memo or a letter over to the water division asking for a response to these issues.
If you, I think Mr. Talbot would be happy to give you a response as far as what the water division's response is. Mr. Talbot.
Yeah, I'm not sure how explicit the water division has been. I can't recall how specific they were at the last public hearing, but in discussions with them over the years, they've always been very clear about why they object to uses in the I5 that are permitted in the IX. In their minds, they see it as a situation where these uses that are permitted in the IX, that's a fact on the ground. That's an existing fact on the ground. They don't want to extend it to the I5 for no other reason than because they think that just that represents that much more of a threat to the watershed. It's not a technical response. It's almost sort of I don't know, I don't want to mischaracterize, but it's almost a political response. To them, existing regulations are a done deal. They're not so much focused on sort of equity in the two districts in terms of uses. They just don't want what's currently permitted in IX portions of the watershed to be extended into IX portions of the I5. I don't think they make a distinction between the nature of the I5 and the IX. It's expansion of uses that I'm going to say it, that they're suspicious. And they've expressed this a number of times.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I'm not sure, Mr. Hine, if that answers your question to your satisfaction, but it's apparently the response that Mr. Talbot has received.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm necessary, and no offense to Mr. Talbot, but I don't know that I'm satisfied with that. We did have Mr. Amway before us last month, and I understand, you know, he probably wasn't prepared for my question, but you know, I think it would be helpful to have somebody, because I just have, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that if a property falls within the water protection district, it's, you know, a particular use is allowed in one district and not the other. And, you know, they are the experts, not me, but I, you know, I think it would be helpful, at least to myself, to have an answer to that. So I can ask some follow-up questions.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time that the issues come before me. You know, I've never heard the Water Division explain that issue before. So I think that would be something that would be helpful.
No, I agree with you. Just to, again, give you a bit more background, Mr. Talbot, last week, the week before, you know, had sent an email to Mr. Amwick looking for a more definitive answer. Is that correct, Mr. Talbot? And to date has not received a response.
Fair enough, and I appreciate that. So I guess my point would be, can we follow up? Can we request a response? And the questions would be, one, why is there the distinction? What is the basis for the distinction? And do they take a position on whether that prohibition should either be done away with in both districts, or whether it should be extended to both districts?
Sure. And again, I believe that was what was included in Mr. Talbot's, email to Mr. Amwick. So, I mean, Mr. Talbot has been pursuing this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And Mr. Allenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any objections to having this withdrawn. We can clearly refile. It sounds like there's a specific deadline in place as to when we'll get the responses back. And it sounds like we'll have a lot more pieces of the puzzle and information. So I think it's in the town's interest to withdraw this so that we can get the further information from the experts, including Mr. Amway, to move forward.
Okay. Thank you. So at this point in time, I would entertain a motion to withdraw this application. As the commission members that were sitting on this application, those should be the ones that should be voting on the motion. And those individuals were Mr. Benoit, Mr. Fitzsimmons, Mr. Cohan, Mr. Allenson, and myself. So again, at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we withdraw application 902-20 zoning text amendment, section 0.9, section 4.11 I5 and 4.13 WED 2.1, 5.15, 6.1 C and 6.12.B. Planning and Zoning Commission.
If Mr. Benoit, if I could just stop you for a moment. Mr. Talbot did indicate that this is a public hearing, and suggested, in fact, that I give any members of the public the opportunity that if they would want to comment. So again, before I entertain the motion, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this?
Jim, I'm on a phone line.
Okay.
Yeah, Ed Bradley, Two Hampton
Okay,
Trail.
Mr. Bradley, if I could just stop you just for a moment. We have Jean
Sure.
Fischette, I believe, would like to comment.
It's Jennifer Frechette.
Jen?
Yes, I just wanted to say that it does feel like the mayor is serving a private party right now, and I'm really upset. As a citizen, I feel like this is delaying further. I feel like I have to continue to watch agendas and, look over my shoulder. It's very anxiety provoking. And I appreciate what you guys are doing, but I'm really disappointed in our mayor right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members that are on the chat bar? And at this point in time, I don't see any. So at this point in time, I would go to the callers, and I believe I heard correct me if I'm wrong, is that Mr. Bradley?
Yes, it is, Jim.
Okay, if you please identify yourself, sir.
Sure, Ed Bradley, to Hampton Trail. I have to agree with the way you're proceeding as far as tabling it. There was an awful lot of information that came before the commission at the last meeting. My particular area was on the I-5, the WPD regulations and comments I made there. I find it kind of strange. I heard Tom talking about distinctions between the IX and I-5, and I'm kind of confused with Mr. Kruger in their stand. I think there's a great distinction between the I-5 and the IX as far as pushing what's currently contained in the IX regs into the I-5 area. The I-5 area, I mean, is part of the watershed. It is wetlands. It is adjacent to the homeowners where they have over 100 people on wells. Spring Lake, and then naturally Mackenzie Reservoir. That was really one of my big objections to the section in the WPD 413 there. I guess my question is going to be, as these proposals are reviewed, how will we, the residents, be made aware of the changes that would be proposed before whenever you schedule your next meeting? I mean, would that be mainly going down to the office and getting all the new revisions to the regs? That's the question.
Yes, I believe that, that would be. I'm not, from my standpoint, and we'll certainly have a, discussion with, with commission members when we get the, let's say, the proposed regulations. I think there'd certainly be a discussion amongst commission members. Should we, have a workshop first to hammer any any concerns out? And certainly all of our workshops are, open to the public, prior to going to a public hearing. So I think that would be something, that the commission would, want to discuss at the time we, receive the, the proposed changes to these regulations. So, everybody would, before the public hearing, through a workshop, at least that's what I'm thinking, would have the opportunity to, to discuss that. So we can get more clarity, and if additional time needs to be obtained, we wouldn't be under essentially the gun for a public hearing. But again, that's a discussion that certainly commission members would have at the at the appropriate time.
Sure. How soon is it that you get your packets on what would be proposed prior to the meeting?
We generally get Mr. Bradley. We get an application, the month before, as far as the various attachments that go into our packet. Candidly, we don't receive those, generally all of them, until the Friday before the meeting.
Friday before. Okay. All righty. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Oh, come on.
Okay, now we're moving down to, as Mr. Bradley was, I can see he was caller number 1, caller number 2, caller number 3, caller number 5, caller number 6, caller number 8, caller number 11, caller 13, and caller 16. So I don't believe any other callers would like to
I'm
comment.
not sure what caller number I actually am. This is Bill Stuckey. At the end of last meeting, we were supposed to get a...
Mr. Stuckey, please, your name and address.
Bill Stuckey, 54 High Hill Road.
Okay.
At the end of the last meeting, we were supposed to get a clean copy of the regs. Did that take place?
No. Because those regulations are, they're being withdrawn.
Okay, I thought they were going to be done in time for this meeting, so. Okay, like Jen, I'm disappointed. I thought, after 14 months, I think you had your first workshop in September of last year. I figured after 14 months, enough people had time to chime in. And also, I got the impression from the Water Division that they wanted to protect the watershed, and manufacturing and warehousing wasn't something they wanted in those areas. So I wonder how you're going to handle applications in the meantime. So I guess that's a question for you guys.
When you say handle, what I'm not sure what you're.
Well, you have an application in the I-5 tonight, and I'm guessing there are some applications in inland wetlands now that might be out of there before you're done with your new regs.
So exactly, our regulations, would not change for any of those applications, and they would be under the existing applications. Under the existing regulations, excuse me.
So I ponder out loud, I wonder if that's why there's a delay. Anyway, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Just in case, Mr. Stuckey, you'd like to comment further, you're caller number 2.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, and with that, as I kind of skipped ahead a bit too much, I would ask, instead of a motion to withdraw, I'd ask for a motion simply to close our public hearing first.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close public hearing for application 902-20, zoning text amendment, section 4.99, section 4.11 I-5, and 4.13 WPD, 2.1, 5.1C, 6.1.C, and 6.12.B point planning and zoning.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Allenson.
Yes.
And I vote yes. At this point in time, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we withdraw application 902-20, zoning text amendment, section 4.99, section 4.10 I-5, and section 4.13 WPD, 2.1, 5.1.C, 6.1.c and 6.12.b, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Allenson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. The application has been withdrawn. That moves us on to, actually, I should have made these comments at the beginning of the meeting, and I apologize for any members of the public that were on for these applications. We have application or item number 3 on our agenda is a special permit. It's a convenience store gas fueling facility, 7-Eleven Inc. at 1033 North Colony Road. That application, or the applicant rather, has requested no action on the application this evening. And a special permit, item number 4, special permit revision, Rocha at 694 North Colony Road. Again, the applicant has requested no action on the application this evening. And I do, for any members of the public that are here this evening on this application, I do apologize for the late notice of the withdrawal. Brings us to the next item on the agenda, item number 5. It's a zoning regulation amendment, section 6.26D, steeple uplighting, night feral. And again, Mr. Matarazzo, if you please read the legal notice and then note all correspondence for the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have a legal notice referencing 505-20 amendment to section 6.26.d of the Wallingford zoning regulations for night and feral to exempt churches, synagogues, or mosques built prior to 1940 from regulations prohibiting steeple lighting. And we have correspondence dated December 28th, 2020 to Steve Knight and Jerry Farrell from Thomas Talbot, planner. And we have a memorandum correspondence to Thomas Talbot, Planning and Zoning Department from Janice Small, Corporation Counsel, dated January 6, 2021. And I believe that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. Would the applicant and or its representative please introduce themselves and begin their presentation?
Hi, it's Jerry Farrell, 54 North Elm Street.
And Steve Knight, 289 Ivy Street.
Okay, gentlemen, you're on.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We've submitted the proposed amendment on behalf of our respective churches. Steve is a member of the First Congregational Church. I'm the parish trustee for Holy Trinity. As you may know, First Congregational has installed uplighting fixtures, while Holy Trinity is thinking about doing so. But what we come up against is section 6.26C2, which prohibits uplighting. However, 6.26D, which is the exemption part, does allow for uplighting of a 1 or 2 family home or of the American flag.
But everyone, please, excuse me, Mr. Farrell, please just mute your microphones and let the applicants speak, whoever they may be. Thank you.
So we're asking that you extend the exemption to church steeples. Mr. Talbot gave me the benefit of his questions about some other situations. What I've tried to do in terms of drafting the amendment for you is to give you a narrow wording, which speaks to steeples built prior to 1940. Obviously, You know, if you want to do something different, that's certainly within the Planning and Zoning Commission's ability, but what we've drafted and given to you actually tries to be fairly narrow. I use 1940 because many statutes, including those referenced by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, use 1940 as a demarcation point for what is a historic structure and what is not. To the best of my knowledge, this amendment would apply to 4 structures, to the best of my knowledge. The First Congregational Church, Holy Trinity Church, the First Baptist Church, and St. Casimir Church. So as best as I can tell, 4 buildings. In the same way that the regulation as currently written recognizes the symbolic value of the American flag, the steeple of a church has symbolic value. Several of the buildings mentioned have a cross at the top of their steeple. So, you know, on the one hand, you allow the uplighting of residential homes and the American flag, and unfortunately, indirectly, you're restraining the uplighting of religious symbols. So we've drafted this very narrowly so that, again, it doesn't allow many people through the eye of the needle. It attempts to make it pretty narrow. You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is that the extent of your presentation?
That is, yes.
Okay. I guess I would just like to make just one comment. Just kind of is kind of full disclosure on this. You know, I'm a member of one of the churches that Mr. Farrell mentioned. However, until this application was presented, I had no knowledge of the of the application, and was not involved with the drafting of this or any discussions of it. As I mentioned, I'm a member of the church. I would like to say I am a member who attends every week, but that may not be the case. But at least I've talked briefly with our corporate counsel on this as far as having a conflict, and she had indicated that she didn't necessarily believe I had a conflict, but certainly left it up to me whether or not I would want to recuse myself on this. And after giving it some thought, given the fact that while I am a member of the church, I'm again not active in its in how the church is operated. And at this point in time, I don't believe that or feel that I do have a conflict. So I just wanted to give a full disclosure on that. But getting back to, I guess, some of the comments here, from my perspective, I have an issue with this because I think there's discriminating against other churches, other religious organizations, whether it be a mosque, a synagogue. I certainly don't understand the 1940 restriction on that. And I appreciate what you mentioned as far as religious organizations, churches, if they have a cross on them. Other religious organizations may have other symbols, but I think we're just discriminating against other churches, and I don't necessarily see why a church or a synagogue or a mosque should be treated any differently when it comes to the uplighting. As far as commercial buildings, if they have a tower or some type of a steeple, attached, prohibiting them from, any uplighting. So those are my comments, but I'll open it up to, commission members for, for their comments on the, on the proposed application. And as always, I start out with Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question would be to the applicants. And I see the questions here from Tom Talbot, but I'm going to read the question because I was thinking about your application. And it said, why uplighting for any towered or spired structure associated with a non-religious use is not proposed as an exemption? And I'm thinking, quite frankly, of Choate. Choate's got some beautiful rooftops and cupolas, if that's the right term, and spheres. If they were to uplight, why are you not proposing including them?
Well, I mean, when you look at it, I think it's a little mischaracterized that I left out other people, that, I'm trying to give you something that, you don't want the floodgates opened on uplighting, and I can appreciate that. So how do we keep the floodgates not open, but yet recognize that there are some legitimate purposes of uplighting, one of which may be religious symbols? So, again, the lawyer in me has drafted something as narrow as possible. However, it's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission, as to how they really want the wording of this to end up. I gave you something narrow. There's no pride of authorship in it. You want to play around with it. You want to open it up. That is certainly your power, your discretion. I thought that, again, to try not to break the floodgates open, that I should look at the specific situation that Steve and I in our respective churches had encountered, and try to solve that, not open a large issue for you.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess if I could, Mr. Chairman, I generally I like this zoning text amendment. I'm not as concerned about the buildings that would not be included, or churches that wouldn't be included, or the others. But I do think it requires a little additional work, because generally uplighting, I've seen it in other towns and other areas. I think done nice, it looks great, and you understand our concern. I'm talking to Jerry and Steve, the lighting, that we see that unfortunately is not always in conformance. So I appreciate the approach you're taking. I would just probably like to, if there's interest, explore further, making sure that we're okay with the definition. And I think of Wallingford is unique. It's a unique number of buildings, and I think that the date, I definitely could support it for the steeples. I just wasn't sure if there's any others, so we wouldn't be accused of discrimination against other buildings that don't meet the criteria, or buildings that aren't being used for churches. So, but I generally, I appreciate your response to the question.
I'm sorry, I would mute myself. Mr. Benoit, questions, comments?
Really, the only thing I would say is I actually agree with Mr. Fitzsimmons. I think there needs to be a little more work on this and a little more dialogue to get us to where, I think I'd feel more comfortable.
Okay. Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bottom line is I'm not in favor of this. St. Paul's Church in Wallingford is another one built before 1940. Basically, that restriction is spot zoning, so that really doesn't meet our requirements. Additionally, a lot of these churches are in residential areas. And, you know, whenever we have a new development, factory, shopping plaza, you know, we try to limit the ambient light that comes off that site. Yeah, we make a lot of provisions to, you know, keep that lighting at a minimum, you know, have it shut off at, you know, a certain time. You know, I didn't see any time cut off for this lighting. So you know, if it was 10 p.m., 11 p.m., that might make a difference to me. But as it's written here, I just, you know, am not in favor of it. And then, yeah, there are other types of buildings, as Mr. Fitzsimmons said, that, you know, again, it could be construed as, you know, spot zoning to have this as it's worded.
That it, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I'm just thinking for anything else I had written down. And yeah, I think Corporation Council had, you know, I do agree with Janice's comments. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have the.
Excuse me, Mr. Farrell, excuse me, I'm asking commission members now for comments, if you would, please. Mr. Matarazzo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with the other commissioners. I think this needs a lot more text, a lot more thought. I'm not opposed to uplighting. You know, done right, it will enhance the structure. But I think as it's written, you know, I look at the comments from Janice Small and corporate counsel, and I just think it needs more work before we can make any comments, decide decisions on it.
Thank you. Mr. Hine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the applicants have, they're aware of what the rub is. You know, the broader that you make it, then you open up the floodgates. The more narrow you make it, the more you run into discrimination issues. So I think everybody's kind of hit on what the issues are, and then I think maybe the solution is focusing on, you know, a definition of steeple and maybe putting in some time limitations for the uplighting, something like that. You know, I don't. I think it's doable, but just not in the current form. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and Mr. Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say I love uplighting. I think it's beautiful. I think the structures in town, including the ones specifically named and the ones named by other commission members, would look beautiful with some uplighting if done properly. My concern, really my main concern on this one is the one raised by corporate counsel, which is the net effect of the resolution. You know, the net effect is that 4 churches and only 4 churches will be able to uplight. And I think that's really the issue. And I think Commissioner Hines struck the nail on the head when he said, there's a point where we get too far and a point where we get too narrow. So I think it can definitely be done with proper language, and I think the town would look great as long as, you know, we can get it to a point where we're not overly broad or overly narrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I'd go back to the applicants.
Mr. Chairman, I do not have the benefit of Janice Small's memorandum. It was never given to me. So that was one of the points I had wanted to make when people started to reference that. At the time that we did engage on this question, that Tom Talbot had suggested speaking with Janice Ball to try to deal with some of these issues. I understand them perfectly, but I couldn't get engagement on the part of Janice Ball to have that conversation. So again, I did the best that I can without having that conversation to give you something that's as narrow as possible. I would appreciate if someone would forward me Janice Ball's memorandum.
Oh, sure, we'll do that. It might be beneficial, obviously, once you receive it. I do apologize that you did not receive it. And unfortunately, at these virtual meetings, I don't have the ability to hand it to you as I might if we were meeting in the council chambers. But we will certainly provide that to you, and I recommend once you have it, you review it, then you make arrangements to meet with Attorney Small.
May I just interject here, as the other person involved in this?
If you would, just for the record, if you just identify yourself, please.
Knight, 289 Ivy Street.
Thank you.
All I'm hoping is that the door is still open, and I think Jerry feels the same way. That I think he tried, and we both tried to thread the needle, thinking that perhaps that would be the most comfortable way that the planning and zoning could find a way to approve what we're looking to do. If, as Jerry said a minute ago, if you're comfortable expanding it, and as Mr. Hines said, that seems to be what you all are looking to do, is find that point on the scale where it includes everybody that should be included, and yet doesn't open the door to misuse. So I hope you all will continue to, approach this the way I've heard you do that tonight.
Yeah, I can't speak for all other commission members, but listening to their comments, I think people are willing. They've given you some feedback. Certainly, you've received that tonight. Once you have a copy of Attorney Small's letter, you'll certainly have her feedback. My general sense is that commission members, would like to continue this, public hearing. And
It's good to hear, Mr. Chairman.
with that, again, this is a public hearing. Please see if there are other members or members of the public that would like to comment. Anyone that would like to comment on this application? Through the chat bar, please indicate so. And at this point, I do not see any. So we will drop down to callers. And if I'm correct in reading this correctly, which I hope I am, I just see that we have a caller number 6. Caller number 8. Again, I don't know who you are, so caller number 6. Caller number 8. Hearing nothing from any of the callers, and seeing no comments through the chat bar. I guess I'd bring it back to the commission, but before I ask various commission members, I would think that there is a desire to continue this public hearing to our next meeting. There's direction given to the applicant. So if any commission members would like to comment, I see Mr. Fitzsimmons has his mic on. I'm not sure if you'd like to comment.
Of course, Mr. Chairman. I'm very much in favor of continuing it. I think as we're talking about it, I think, and again, I listen, I know I think there seems to be some consensus, a slim consensus, that at least let's look and see, if the applicants could talk with the town attorney. My issue is just to make sure we're not excluding other potential parties, not religious institutions, just other parties. So,
Okay,
but yeah, I'd be happy to continue.
okay, Mr. Benoit?
You got the same thing.
And I guess instead of going through the whole list, any commission members that would like to make any further comments as far as continuing the public hearing? Yes, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to reiterate my comment about, churches in residential areas, because there's a number of them that would meet this, change. I really get hung up on, keeping these lighted, past 11 o'clock. I get light from, a shopping plaza where their lights are on all night, and it's very disturbing. So for me, a big thing is going to have to be, putting a time limit on how late the uplighting is left on. That's really my concern with this, is the impact on, residents in a residential area with a church. So I'm okay with continuing. Thank
Good,
you.
thank you. And I don't see any other commission members that would like to make any comments. So with Mr. Talbot, would you like to make any comments? And I take it, Mr. Farrell and Mr. Knight, if the commission so moves to continue, you would not have an objection with that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good.
No, not at all.
Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to our February meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue application 505-20 zoning regulation amendment, section 6.26.d, steeple uplighting, Knight and Farrell for our February 2021 meeting.
I have a second to the motion.
I'd second that.
Second, Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Mr. Cohan.
Yes.
Mr. Matarazzo.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So your gentlemen, we hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
You're welcome. Good night. All right, it brings us now to our item number 5, which is excuse me, we already handled that. Brings us to item number 6, new business. It's a site plan, Proton International, 932 Northrop Road. Again, with the applicant and or its representative introduce himself. However, prior to that, I would ask Mr. Matarazzo to note all correspondence for the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have correspondence dated December 23rd, 2020 to Proton International LLC, signed Thomas Talbot, planner. We have correspondence dated January 6th, 2021 to Thomas Talbot. Is signed by Andrew White, Charles J. Croce, and we have correspondence dated January 4th, 2021 to Attorney Jim Laughlin. And that is again signed by, I should say again, that's Craig D. Yanes and Charles J. Croce. Hope I'm saying that right. Correspondence dated January 5th, 2021. Allison Kaczynski. Not sure if I'm saying that right. This is signed by Andrew White, Charles Croce, and a site
Mr. Matarazzo, if you could please move your microphone and get a little bit closer to your microphone. You're breaking up on us. Mr. Matarazzo.
There it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I don't know what happened there. Correspondence, dated, January 6, 2021. And, Mr. Thomas, Talbot, town planner, signed, Attorney Jim Laughlin. Interoffice memorandum to Aaron O'Hara, environmental planner, from Eric Kruger, senior engineer, dated January 5th, 2021. Correspondence to Planning and Zoning Commission from Department of Engineering, dated December 30th, 2020. Interdepartmental referral, dated November 25th, 2020, signed by the town engineer. Interdepartmental referral dated November 25th, 2020, signed by the fire marshal. Correspondence to Inland Wetlands Watercourses Commission from Department of Engineering dated December 30th, 2020. Memorandum to Town Talbot, acting town planner, from Aaron O'Hara, environmental planner. Dated January 8th, 2021. Interoffice memorandum to Thomas Talbot, acting town planner, from Eric Kruger, senior engineer, dated January 7th, 2021. And a set of plans dated or received January 6th, 2021. I believe that's it.
And just as you were breaking up, there was one other item that I'm not sure that you mentioned or not. It's just a conceptual rendering, which was dated January 6th, 2021.
Yep.
Good. So with that, I would ask the applicant and or its representative to please introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Laughlin, an attorney here in town. My office is on North Main Street. I'm here in town on behalf of Proton International. With me on your screen, whom you can see, are Pete Carbone. He's with Proton International. That's the applicant. Andrew P. White is with Ty and Bond, the engineers on the project. Their local offices are in Middletown and Belton. Paul Rushton, he's an architect on the project. He's in the UK. Frank Labus, he's also an architect. And Paula Williams is on the telephone. This would-be use is a proposed cancer treatment center. State-of-the-art with top-shelf partners. State-of-the-art technology would be radiation therapy, surgery done with protons instead of photons. Protons are heavier. This heavier particulate matter provides for more precise surgical, less of a spray, sort of like with your flashlight. When you flash it at night, there's the spray. With the heavier particulate matter, it's more precise in its surgery that allows for better efficiency and better surgery that also has less of an adverse impact, less collateral damage on the surrounding tissue and organs. There is a superconductor on site, one of only 63 in the whole world. Proton International is involved as a participant in 7 of those projects. It would be some 27 or 28,000 square foot building with 1 treatment room. The partners are Yale New Haven Health and Hartford Hospital, Hartford Healthcare. Yale New Haven and Hartford Hospital, together with Proton International right here in Wallingford. Its location is at the intersection of Interstate 91 and Route 68, adjacent to the north from the Marriott. It's a fully taxable building that will generate nominal traffic. For bookkeeping purposes, it's in an I-5 zone. We're fully compliant so far as a use. It's an outpatient medical facility. All bulk restrictions are met, meaning that our setbacks and our height restrictions have all been satisfied. We did apply for a variance with the ZBA and it was granted. It was a parking variance where we are permitted 50 parking spaces where somewhere between 112 and 116 are required. This significant reduction was granted for several reasons. Number one, to protect the aquifer beneath the property. Number two, to preserve the trees, which are in keeping with the campus-like setting under the comprehensive plan. And in addition, it resulted in a reduction of 20,000 square feet of impervious surface. Namely, the parking lot was reduced by that much. It is in the Aquifer Protection District. We met with the Water Division twice, face-to-face, at a roundtable with other departments. Eric Kruger had no objection, and he spoke in favor of the variance. His memo that's been included in the materials, there is no stated objection, and rather he just goes into the routine list of matters that should be covered during construction and implementation. We're proceeding under the site plan section of this, of the zoning regulation because we are beneath the 100 peak hour vehicle trips. This is based on traffic estimates under the Institute of Transportation Engineers. That's the authority cited in your regulation. In addition, we are basing our traffic on our own use. There are 4 other sites like this that Proton International participates in that show that we will have 24 employees at most in any given part of the day. On the less active part of the day, there will be no more than 13 employees. In addition, because there's only 1 treatment room, we will have no more than 3 or 4 patients on site at any given time. So 24 plus 4 is 28, which rounds up to 30. So that when we were asking for 50 spaces, that was actually much more than we needed. And that's one of the reasons why we were granted the variance. In turn, that reflects on the amount of traffic that we're going to be generating on a daily basis. This is minimal. There is no traffic study necessary. Compared to the other uses that are permitted in this zone, this is a very user-friendly one. We haven't included any signage plans because we aren't quite certain of a lot of the details on the inside or how they will apply on the outside, since we're between 91, 68, and Northrop Road. There are 3 major roads involved, so we don't know exactly what signage we will need. So we'll be back with you either for approval in front of your staff, or we may be speaking again with you. We met with Aaron and the Wetlands Commission, and they approved us in 1 meeting. They worked well with us. Everybody at staff with Wetlands and Water, and Tom and Amy were all great to work with. They met with us a bunch of times. And finally, I think we've satisfied, we responded to all of the comments in Mr. Talbot's letter, which were very helpful. I tried my best in my letter, but also substantively, Andrew White included the changes in his plans, which were recently submitted. Before we move on to Andrew, if we could take a look at the photograph. Mr. Chairman, if you could include Andrew White as a presenter. Picture speaks 1,000 words.
Excuse me, Mr. White, you should have the wheel right now.
Okay. There is a rendering coming in from Northrop Road. Architecturally, we have 3 architects on staff who are here tonight who could comment better than I can. It's a pastoral setting. We've preserved as much of the trees as possible. Everything in its design is to ease the entrance of the cancer patient from Northrop Road into the facility. You'll see the atrium there is full height and it's glass. And the waiting area there is really well sunlit. In addition, there will be some visibility from I-91 that'll also make travel to the site a lot easier. It's 2 stories. All entrances are on the first floor. The pastoral setting on the outside is designed to relax the patient, ease of access, and then the layout in the inside during the waiting period and the only 1 treatment room is all designed to cater to the patient. And again, please direct any questions you might have on the design to the architects because obviously my knowledge is limited. Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. If there are no more questions for me, I'd like to move on to Andrew White.
Thank you, Jim. I'll now walk you through the site itself. As Attorney Laughlin mentioned earlier, our site is located north of the Marriott. It is on Northrop Road, north of Route 68, and west of Interstate 91. All access from to the site will be via the exit ramp to the south of the property and then north onto Northrop Road. The existing site is 11.79 acres, most entirely wooded. There's a man-made drainage swale that runs north to south through the site. For your orientation, north is oriented to the right of your screen. There are a series of catch basins on Northrop Road that discharge onto the site. Approximately 90% of the site stormwater, any rainwater that hits the site now, comes down to a culvert located on the south edge of our property, just 24-inch pipe that goes beneath the Marriott's parking lot. A small corner of the site discharges directly to 91. The site plan itself for the remainder of these sheets north will be to the top of your screen with Northrop Road on the left-hand side. As we mentioned before, we received a parking variance for 50 parking spots. We have our site driveway off of Northrop Road. It comes to the front of the building. The front entrance is located on the north. Majority of the parking is located to the east, as well as additional 9 spaces in the north, and then 2 loading spaces for additional spaces to the west. Sidewalks will come in off the parking lot, surround the entire building. There is a generator, transformer, dumpsters on the west side of the site, screened by a screening wall to the north, so they're not visible to patients as they're entering the site. And there will be a canopy at the front entrance and a drop-off area that's this highlighted cyan color on this drawing. Site grading, well, I didn't color this one up, is very nominal. We're between 4 and 2% slopes throughout the parking lot. There is 3 to 1 slopes on the west side of the site, as well as slopes surrounding the site, swales. In addition, when talking with the water department, we have provided sand filters to meet their stormwater requirements, which I'll now discuss in a bit more detail in the stormwater design. So this site, as I mentioned earlier, has a drainage swale running north to south. We're proposing to intercept that drainage swale through a 24-inch culvert to route that through our driveway and then discharge about 100 feet north of the existing 24-inch culvert at the south end of the property. Per Wallingford Water Department regulations, we have 2 stormwater systems. We have storm drains that collect exclusively landscaped areas, which are in the dark blue, that discharge to swales, ultimately to the 24-inch pipe. And then we have the drainage system highlighted in cyan, which is picking up paved areas and go to 2 sand filters, as well as water quality hydrodynamic separators per the aquifer watershed protection requirements. The building itself is treated as clean water and has a subsurface underground infiltration system, and the parking, the rainwater discharge from the parking surfaces after the sand filter goes to its own underground infiltration system. So for this project, we are reducing peak flow offsite and volumetric runoff offsite, and there will be no impact downstream. Utilities for the building are all fed off of Northrop Road. From 2 utility poles, we have redundant tel data service that comes down and enters the building. We have our primary electric off of one of the poles as well that comes into an on-site transformer. There will be a generator located on site for emergency backup power, as this is a medical facility. We have water and fire protection on 2 laterals off of Northrop Road that come down and enter the building. We'll also have a fire department connection for a fire truck to boost the sprinkler systems within the building, as well as on-site fire hydrant. Sanitary sewage from the building will exit to the north and will connect to the existing sanitary sewer in Northrop Road. During the construction process, we have fully compliant state of Connecticut soil erosion control methods. For this project, due to the presence of that drainage swale, we have broken our soil erosion controls into 2 phases. The first phase, as shown here, is for stripping the stock, or stripping the site of its organic topsoil and protecting the swale and access to the site. We have 2 temporary sediment traps shown in this first phase, one for our stockpiling activity, the second for a majority of the tree cutting and clearing, as well as hay bale check dams in the drainage swale and silt fence construction entrances, and even temporary timber swamp mats for vehicular traffic of the drainage swale. For the second phase of soil erosion control, this is as the building is more advanced. As the foundation goes in, the first sediment trap would be decommissioned after the culvert is installed, as well as bypassed, and the site begins to be raised. The second sediment trap stays for the north area, and we have stockpiling within the parking area as it's flattened out, and then perimeter controls throughout the site to maintain any silt and sediment coming off the site. For landscape, as this loads, we are proposing a restoration seed mix for a majority of the grassed areas around the site, with a more manicured 6-foot strip along the drive aisle and parking. We have a forested restoration area to the north, where we're going to be seeding trees and shrubs to the north, as well as aggressive tree planting to the northwest from where we had our utilities coming into the site, and then a mixture of specimen trees and plantings along the north face and all the sides of the building, as well as landscape within the parking above and beyond the landscape criteria set by zoning, because we want the client particularly wanted a more manicured look in the parking lot, and to break up, even though it's less than 50 spots in the eastern lot, break up a parking lot feel for this experience. And our last plan I'll show you is our lighting plan. We have poles located around the lot to provide approximately 1-foot candle average lights around the driveway and building, as well as decorative light bollards as you're coming down. And then the front landscape area will have little 10-inch tall little bollards along the front walk to provide some additional ambiance lighting, not so much as site lighting. And that is the project in a nutshell. I'd love to open it up to any questions from the commissioners.
And again, Attorney Lockland, I take it at this moment, this is the extent of your presentation, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good. All right, so at this point in time, I would open this up to questions from commission members. And again, we will start off with, we'll do it this time with Mr. Vinoy.
No comment.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I think it's a very interesting design, but as you were going through the presentation, I was trying to determine the front of the building, because Wallingford has a building orientation zoning requirement, and it looks as if the building is askew on the lot. Is that, am I, I have plans here as well, but I saw your presentation. Where is the front, and is it facing Northford, or is it on the side view of Northford?
Go ahead, Andrew.
The front of the building, if you can see my cursor here, is oriented to the north. So this protrusion of the building here, where the car canopy is the main entrance. So as you're coming north on Norfolk Road and take a right into the site, you have a line of sight directly to the front face of the building, which is the view that was shown in the rendering. So that, while the building is not directly perpendicular to the road, along your line of sight entering the property, you have a direct view of the front of the building.
I guess my thought would be, I would envision the majority of the traffic would be coming from the other direction. You wouldn't be getting much coming from Northrop to 68 to be coming off 68 onto Northrop.
Correct.
Yeah. I guess if I could, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Talbot, I mean, is this plan in conformance with our zoning, building orientation?
I'm hearing you.
I would say substantially it is. I think it meets the general intent of the regulation. I understand your concern that it's not lining up directly with the street. This is a regulation that this is the first time I've encountered this regulation here in Wallingford. That kind of regulation with front entrances, that's usually something, that's more of an urban regulation where everything's along the street, you're trying to orient along the street. Here, you're a couple of hundred feet off the street. So I think generally it does comply. It complies with the intent.
Okay.
Where, I mean, without moving the building, where else would you put, seriously, without moving the building, where would you put the entrance to make it more in compliance, I guess would be what I would say. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate your comments, Tom. I think my concern was just, I know we had put that reg in the books just a couple of years ago, and it was because of retail. There was a retail application that eschewed the building But this is, you're right, it's a pastoral setting. I mean, the applicant said it themselves. I don't want to be saying, well, you know, we approved it, but it doesn't conform. If your position is it substantially conforms, I tend to agree, it's just angled differently, and it's not going to be a straight angle. So
Yeah,
you
I
know,
would say if it was, other than from looking at the plan, where we're looking at the plan, if it was to the left, the left side, I guess, south side, you could say that it's more in compliance, but it's not at all in the spirit of in the intent of the regulation, and the other two sides, not at all.
yeah.
So, like I said, this is situations like this, you kind of have to do the best you can with that regulation, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
because you referred to detail, it's not just an urban thing, it's also a highway thing.
Right. All right, thank you, Tom. Then my only other comments, Mr. Chairman, are I had nothing further. I appreciate the fact that they went to the ZBA in this situation to get a variance to have reduced parking, which is a very unique thing. So I appreciate your explanation. I appreciate you doing that, because we don't need more blacktop where you don't need it. So I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do have a couple of comments and questions. I am in favor of this. This looks like a great design. I did have the same exact concern as Mr. Fitzsimmons, and you know, based on Mr. Talbot's explanation and the orientation where it is, I'm fine with that. I think this is going to be a great addition to Wallingford, you know, low impact usage. And if I could be so bold, I guess, is to ask, I know you guys looked at several other locations. Why Wallingford? What attracted you to Wallingford?
Peter?
Can't hear you.
Sir, I'm afraid we can't hear you. Again, we still cannot hear you. It appears your microphone is on, but we can't hear you.
Maybe the volume needs to be turned up.
Yeah, I think, sir, if you can turn your volume up, because we're not able to hear you. I can see your lips moving, and I can see your microphone is lit green, but and we still have the same problem. I'm not certain if there may be another member of the applicant that would like to address that question.
I'll venture a guess. It's a favorable location because it's visibility from 91. It's halfway between Hartford and New Haven, which is Yale New Haven and Hartford Hospital, and halfway between Boston and New York. All these factors have been with Wallingford for a long time now. And the utility rates are very, very good. I hope that's what Peter was going to say. And funny thing, this was going to be the first opportunity for him to speak at a meeting. And he, well, sorry.
I see Peter has shaking his head that he's in agreement.
Yeah, thanks. I'm in total agreement with that assessment. I do have one other question. And this is for Andrew, I guess the architect. I go by this site many times a week, and I'm not sure what the previous use of this property was. And there is a stone gate located almost on Northrop on the southern edge. And I think it's kind of where your driveway is going in. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but again, I don't know if it has any historical value. It's a section of a real nice stone kind of gate entrance, and I think there's some remnants of some other stonework on the property. And I'm just wondering if you've seen it and if it's worth, saving.
I think I will answer that if I may. My name is Paul Rushton. I'm the Director of Design for Proton International, based in the UK. So greetings from the motherland, everybody. We are aware of the post. I think it is just a simple stone post. It's slightly away from where we are looking to develop, and we're just going to keep it as is. We're not going to take it down. We're respectful of the history that post may have. And we don't know any further history than the fact that it's there and it exists, but we're certainly not, we do not intend to take it away. But yes, we are aware and we have seen it.
Okay, great. Again, I think this is a great application. I think it's what you're doing, the design, I like it, and I think it'd be a great addition to Wallingford. So, good luck, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me now. I think I fixed the microphone. You hear me?
Well, I take it, sir. I take it, sir. Though you, Mr. Lachlan, essentially said what you'd like to say, or would you like to add some additional comments?
It was right on. It was exactly. We're very happy to be here. It's been a joy working with your staff. We love the property. It's great that it's adjacent to a hotel because that helps when our patients do need to have a place to stay. Better than right next door. And then our partners have been fantastic to deal with. They really want us here too. So it really has all worked out.
That's great. Again, thank you, and this will be a success. Great establishment. Thank you.
Mr. Matarazzo, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's going to be a great addition to Wallingford. Everybody's knows somebody or is afflicted some way with cancer, and I can get behind this project wholeheartedly. I have family members that have been affected, and I think it's going to be a great project and a great addition to Wallingford. I have no problems with the orientation, and as Mr. Fitzsimmons knows, I've brought up orientation of buildings along our Colony Road, Route 5. I don't know if that's the regulation you were referring to, Mr. Fitzsimmons. I didn't know if that, I thought we had set that up and it only referred to structures along the Colony Road, Route 5 corridor. I didn't think it branched out into the outer areas of Wallingford, but I don't have a problem with the orientation. I think it's a great looking building, and landscaping looks in keeping, and I'm definitely behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. I think Mr. Talbot has somewhat confirmed your reference to that regulation, although you should be well aware of it, as we indicated, that was the Matarazzo regulation. But moving on, Mr. Hyde. And any questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. I just want to express my excitement for the project. I think this is perfect for the area, perfect for Wallingford. And I just want to welcome you and wish you success. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Allenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also don't have any questions. I just want to say that I think the applicant and his attorney did an excellent job in the presentation. It was extremely thorough and very well informative. The project looks outstanding. And again, I am also excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you. And from my perspective, not to be redundant, I certainly agree with the comments that the various commissioners made. Certainly appreciate you gentlemen choosing Wallingford to put this this use, this building in. I do have just one thing, and it's really somewhat of a minor point. When I was just looking at your chart on the parking for, you know, what you're providing, you've indicated you have 50 car parking spaces plus 4 handicap, so that would be 54. And I'll be the darn, when I totaled everything up, I only came up with 52. And then, and I do have a, you know, a question just in a required and permitted. For car parking, you have 116, and I know you received the variance, and you have that delta with the 2 in it. And I see that in several places on the plans. I'm just curious what that reference is. And again, you know, just to clarify the number of parking spaces.
Yes, absolutely. So actually, the number of parking spaces in total is 50 by my last count. The way that we do parking calculations, handicap is not on, or accessible spaces is not on top of the required number. It is a part of the number. And sometimes you get into a discrepancy where if you go over by 1 spot, you add a handicap spot, you have to add another one because you hit the threshold. But in this instance, it is just 50 in total. We were only required to provide 2 per zoning regulations, but due to the nature of being a medical facility, we opted to provide 4 since the use will certainly be there. And then the delta with a 2 corresponds to a second revision. So we were at the wetlands hearing last week, and we were coordinating with Erin O'Hare in her department, as Attorney Laughlin had referenced earlier in the presentation. And due to our coordination with them, there was 1 set of drawing revisions that was issued as Delta 1. And then in our continued correspondence with Tom Talbot in his office and the town engineer, there were some additional minor comments that were brought. And so these were classified under revision 2, which is the latest and greatest that we have submitted.
Okay, but again, I don't mean to belabor the point, but when and maybe I'm missing 2 spaces, but when, you know, I total, you know, the spaces eliminating the parking, and just for a second here, I only come up with 48. I guess just to make it easy, and maybe I'm missing 2 spaces, but when I'm looking at the front of when I'm looking at the, you know, it's your plans, which would be the front of the building, to the left, you have 9 spaces. Then there's 2, then there's 4, then there would be 20 spaces by eliminating the handicap, and then 13. Again, maybe I'm.
So the handicap are included in those 50, as I said earlier. So the circles on the plan on the screen with the number in them is indicative of the number of spots within a row. So proceeding right here at the number 12, 3, an additional 3 is 6, another 4 is 10, and then the 2 handicap is 12. Additionally, the same thing on the other side, another 12. And then on the far eastern row is another 13. So by my count, that is 37 spots in the eastern lot. 9 spots along the frontage. 9 spots brings us up to 46. And then you have the 4 additional parking spaces on the west side of the building, which brings you to 50. And then we have the 2 loading spots, which are not considered parking spots.
Oh, okay, that's my error. I was looking at those as parking spaces.
Okay.
I apologize for that, and I apologize for dragging this on.
No trouble. Happy to answer the question.
Good. Thank you. Okay, this you know, is not a public hearing, but we do allow members of the public to comment Are there any members of the public that would like to comment? I noticed that Mr. Ryan had made a comment that he may want to comment on the gate being referred to. I'm not sure if Mr. Ryan would like to do that or if he would like to make any comments on the application. So, Mr. Ryan, you'd like to speak? You may speak.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Well, I want to just thank the commission for what appears to be their overwhelming support of this application. This has been a journey of several years. It's coming to fruition this evening. I also want to thank Mr. Carboni, who has been absolutely fantastic to work with. He has delivered every item on time, in detail, has worked very well with not only myself, but other members of the town staff. And as has been echoed already, I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Wallingford for all of the reasons that have already been stated. So I'll keep it short. It's great. I think it's been 2.5 years, Peter, and it's great to see us come to this point, and we're almost home. So again, I anticipate and thank the commission for their overwhelming support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Any other members of the public that would like to comment on the application? I don't see any, and I don't see that there are any callers that are on the line. So with that, I would again bring it back to the applicant. If the applicant would like to make any final comments, certainly you're not obliged to. So I leave that with the applicant.
I think we're set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I take it all commission members are have no further questions. That being said, at this point, I would entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application 221-20, site plan application for Proton International for a 27,810 square foot outpatient medical treatment facility on 11.82 acres as shown on plans entitled Connecticut Proton Therapy Center Outpatient Facility, Proton International, 932 Northrop Road, dated December 1st, 2020, revised to January 6, 2021, subject to 1, comments in Interoffice Memorandum from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, Water and Sewer Division, to Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, CC to Tom Talbot, Planner, dated January 5th, 2021. 2, comments in Interoffice Memorandum from the Fire Marshal to the Planning and Zoning Department, dated December 18th, 2020. Comments in Interoffice Memorandum from Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, to Thomas Talbot, Planner, listing all conditions of Inland Wetlands Commission approval, A20-12.1, dated January 8th, 2021. All conditions of this approval to be incorporated into application for site plan application 221-20 with the exception of condition number 1 bonding. Number 4, comments in Interoffice Memorandum from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, Water and Sewer Division, to Thomas Talbot, Planner, dated January 7, 2021. And 5, sediment and erosion control bond of $30,000.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit. We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons, voting beginning with Mr. Benoit.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Mr. Cohan.
Yes.
And Mr. Matarazzo.
Yes.
And I vote yes, your application, gentlemen, has been approved, and I think as other commission members have mentioned, as well as Mr. Ryan, we certainly appreciate you folks choosing Wallingford and look forward to having you as good corporate citizens. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us down to number 7, extension. I've been informed by Mr. Talbot there is no action requested on that at this point in time. Going down to reports of officers and staff, number 9 is the ZBA notice for January 19th, 2021. Anyone with questions on the various applications? Seeing no one interested in commenting, we'll drop down to our zoning enforcement log, and I will note that Amy Torrey is here on the call. So again, anyone with questions on the zoning enforcement log? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've been asking about, 12 and 15 Windswept Road, Paradise Hills Winery, and I think Ms. Story attached some, list of activities. But I was just wondering what, currently the status was. This goes back, 2016. It looks like the last update. So I'm just wondering, yes, it's been on the books for a while.
And Mrs. Torrey, would you like to comment, please?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. I was having some camera here, but not audio. Regarding the Paradise Hills and the 12 Windswept Hill, Mrs. Hand had been sort of dealing with that to her departure. However, I can speak to most of the issues were regarding some special events and some special conditions surrounding those events. There's to be some recording or reporting earlier of something upcoming, the amount of attendees and the date and the specifics and the details of said events. Whether that has occurred with the pandemic sort of entering in, I don't believe, we're not aware, let's put it that way, that those events have occurred. And certainly COVID has altered the nature of business and extracurricular activity, if you will. But that was the nature of the violations, was making sure they adhered to, they had a certain amount, and I can't respond being sort of to the number that they were permitted per year. It's a violation. They were limited to a certain number with a 30-day notification, etc. And those had either occurred or been in violation thereof in a period of time. So that does need to be revisited, as does many of the habitual sort of violations recurring through 2020, because there has been a separate set of circumstances involved this year.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, it brings us down to just administrative approvals. We have the change of use for Barnes Homestead, 235 New Cheshire Road, change of use Termini at 237 Hall Avenue, and a survey waiver for Baker at 4 Union Street. So with that, I think that we have covered all of our agenda items. I will just suggest that at our last meeting, we had talked about looking at our food truck regulations, perhaps, allowing them at wineries and other uses. I know we all had indicated that we wanted to spend a bit more time reviewing the regulations, reviewing that perhaps was being proposed. So I would ask commission members prior to our next meeting, if people would direct their attention to that and just come up with some ideas as far as what we would like or not like to do, with respect to the food trucks. So if no one has any further comments that they'd like to make, and I don't see any, I would certainly entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn the Planning and Zoning Commission for Monday, January 11th, 2021.
we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Fitzsimmons, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Night.